Thought I'd share a video that I made for my niece, Livy Lou, who's learning how to sew. Making doll clothes is a fun way to start building those sewing skills. In this video, you'll learn how to make this inexpensive doll skirt by machine or by hand. Ready to begin? You'll find a link to this supply list below. Make sure to press your fabric before you get started. Cut one 7-inch by 18-inch piece for the top and then one 3 by 18 piece for the bottom. If you don't have access to rotary cutting equipment, don't worry. Later in this video, you'll find out how you can make a newspaper pattern and use your scissors to cut out your skirt. You need to make a covering for this elastic. This is called a casing. It's like a tunnel made from cloth. First, you'll press about 1/4 inch down, then you'll press about 1/2 inch down. I like to use an old file folder for this. I've marked 1/4 inch along the top, and I fold my fabric over to that line and press. Then I like to give it one good shot after I take the folder out. I marked 1/2 inch on the other side of the folder. Fold that fabric over till it hits that line and then press. Remove the folder and press one more time. Press the bottom strip in half. Put wrong sides together, line up the edges, and then press. You want to stitch as close as you can to this folded edge. I'm using red thread so you can see, but you'll want to use a matching thread and bobbin. I put my feed dogs down, and my needle is going to be just a little over from that edge. I'll start by sewing in reverse to lock my stitches, and then I'll sew forward. But first I want to make sure I remove my pins, and I'll continue sewing. When you get to the end, you want to back stitch to lock your stitches. And here's my casing. Next, you'll take the skirt bottom, put right sides together. You want the folded side here and the open side on this edge, and then pin. You'll be sewing a 1/4 inch seam. 1/4 inch is the distance from where your needle goes down to usually the first mark on your sewing machine. Put your pressure foot down, sew a few stitches forward and then a few back to lock your stitches, and continue sewing. Make sure to take those pins out. The edge of your fabric should go along that 1/4 inch mark. If you're having trouble following that mark, you can use a piece of tape to make it easier. When you get to the end, make sure to lock your stitches. After stitching, press your seam towards the top. Before you add the elastic, you might want to add some extras to your project, such as buttons or maybe some lace trim. To figure out how much elastic I needed, I placed the elastic around the doll's waist. It's about 11 inches for this doll, and I cut a piece that size. And then I pinned a safety pin on the end. The safety pin has to be small enough to go through that casing. Here's my safety pin. I'll hold on to the end here, push some of that fabric there, and then pull. You might have noticed that my elastic is getting close to the end here, so I like to put a pin there just to make sure that I don't pull it through. You'll notice that it'll start bunching up as you get closer to the edge. I want to stitch this in place. I used my sewing machine to go back and forth to keep that elastic there. Then I came to where the elastic was pinned, and then I sewed back and forth to ensure that elastic stays in place. I'll just clip that extra off. Put right sides together, match up the hem, and pin. Stitch the seam and press. And here's the skirt. In this section, you'll get some tips for hand sewing the skirt. First, you'll find out how to make a newspaper pattern. Lay out your newspaper and start marking. Measure 3 inches from the edge and mark, and then measure 7 inches from the edge and mark. Scoot over and make another mark at 3 inches and at 7 inches. Measure 18 inches from this edge, make a mark, scoot over again, and then make your mark. Line up a yardstick on your mark and then draw your line. Repeat at the 7-inch line and on the 18-inch marks. Cut out your pattern on the 7-inch line. Pin the pattern in place on your fabric and then carefully cut around the edges. Fold your pattern on the 3-inch line and then fold a couple inches under. Take that pattern and then pin your pattern in place. Use your scissors to cut out the bottom of the skirt. Hold on to your pattern if you're thinking of making another skirt. Mark down some important information and then place it with the supply list. After pressing the casing, pin it in place. If sewing by hand, you'll want to pin your casing with the pins going in that direction. Thread your needle with a double strand. You'll want to sew as close to this edge as possible. Use small stitches while sewing. If you're using a heavy-duty needle, you can add more than one stitch on at a time. Remove your pins as you sew. Continue stitching till you get to the end. If you're having difficulty making those smaller stitches, no problem. When you get to the end, stitch halfway between each stitch. And now you have smaller stitches. Remember to make sure that your knot ends up on the wrong side of the fabric. Press the bottom section in half. Before sewing the top to the bottom, you'll want to draw a line 1/4 inch from the edge. Put right sides together, making sure that the opening is against this edge. Pin in place and then stitch down that line. Draw a line 1/4 inch over from the edge. This is the line you'll follow when you make the final seam. And now it's time to use the casing. Pull the elastic through the casing and then stitch the end in place. Trim the elastic if needed. Put right sides together, match the edges at the end, and pin. Stitch the seam and press. And this skirt is now complete. After you make one skirt, you might like to design another one. Change the length. You can make it shorter or longer. Try adding trim or buttons. Use fabric markers to decorate the bottom. Recycle a favorite piece of clothing and use the hem to your advantage. Hope you try making one of these skirts. They're fun to put together and a great way to practice your sewing skills. Thanks for visiting LearnHowToQuilt.com. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and share our videos with your friends. Thanks.